There we go. Okay. It's being recorded now, everybody, so that's the good news. I just had to hit the button. Okay, so a couple things. First of all, for those of you who did attend the workshop, thank you so much for coming into the SeaTac area and attending. We thought it went quite well. We had wonderful feedback. As many of you recall, we used a variety of ways to look at how we evaluated the workshop. One of the things I like to do, and I'll send out an email, is request an okay to publish your photos as part of our newsletter that'll come out in December. So if you're adverse to that, just pop me an email so I know. But that was one of the methods we used for evaluation. It was I took a picture of you guys with your hands up. And no, I wasn't robbing you. But you know, it's one of the new ways we can evaluate how you're doing in a continuing education class. You can do an observation as the nurse planner and actually observe the interaction and participation and do a narrative on that. That's another way to do evaluation. You can do this standard evaluation form as well, and then you can also do, you could do Twitter. You can do, another thing we did was we had you throw the ball around and have people talk, and then we wrote down what people's responses were to the topic. So I thought that went very well, and there were some areas that I wanted to address today. And one of the big ones is around process versus forms, and so I really appreciate some of you identifying that while we went through some of the process, and I'm going to clarify it a little bit more in the forms in a minute, that you wanted more on the quote forms. And so we'll talk about that right now. So on the website, a couple things I wanted to point out, and you can see the website here, and I'm actually going to go back to here. I've already posted the new go-to meeting for February 6th at noon, and this is Pacific Standard Time, just a reminder. And so I've already got that set up for you. And then later today or early tomorrow, I will add a link like this one for today's meeting information. So that meeting's already set up for you. And hopefully you can make it, because Mondays seem to work around lunchtime quite well. So when you go into the website, I've done some more updating and removed the new stuff, the word new. So I'm going to go into the provider application, and I can either come here or I can just go through these two areas. So I'm just going to go through the provider unit. You can take a second. So I want to talk a little bit about the confusion. There was confusion about the gap analysis in the planning table versus the education planning form. So why I'm bringing that up is if you're a new nurse planner, or you're training a new nurse planner, or you're a large facility such as Sanford or Nebraska, where you're having to work with people off-site and they want to do a continuing nursing education class, these two forms here, the GAP and the planning form, these two here help build that. These are not, again, not required when you submit your paperwork if I was to audit you or you're coming up for renewal as a provider unit. So these are learning tools, and yes, they are repetitive. And part of the reason they're repetitive is there's an assumption people don't know how to do a gap analysis, or they're not familiar building a educational activity, and then this information repeats itself back up in here. So I'll look at this real quick just to give you, and I'm live on our website so that you can see what's on our website. Was there a question? It'll take a second. So it's downloading. Maybe I should have just done it off my own folder. But so the idea is if it was an activity application, I actually give directions on how to do that because people seem to be confused. It's required for an activity. So if you're, oh, this is taking forever, that's not a good sign. I will pull out of this. Oh, maybe in my lifetime. So I'm not sure why it's now frozen. Oh, it's thinking. Ah, there it is. Okay. So this is the gap analysis sheet, and this is the one that most of you recall seeing at the workshop again. And again, you do not, as experienced nurse planners and primary nurse planners, have to use this, right? But if you're orientating someone new, or you have a question about they really, really want to do a class on X, then this is a good worksheet to work with people who are not as experienced as yourself. So as you recall, we walked through the current state, what is currently happening, desired state, what should be happening at the end of the activity, what's the gap, where is the evidence, then is it knowledge, skill, or practice, and it can be one of them or all three of them, depending on the activity. What do you want the learners to be able to demonstrate at the result of participating at the activity? So, you know, what's going to happen at the end of the road, and then finally, how are you going to evaluate it to close that gap? And so in the workshop, and for the few that have not attended the workshop, I will send you the slides for this because I think the examples were really well done and people like the examples in the gap analysis worksheet. So that would how the worksheet works. Questions so far? Nope. Okay. Oh, I don't need that. I need to go back here. So then here's your planning table. Now, thanks to Sandy who pointed out she wanted more lines. There's more lines on this. And this would be you take the gap analysis, and I realize it feels redundant, copy and paste. And frankly, ladies, you don't have to fill all this out again because you're not an activity applicant. You guys are provider unit applicants. And then you fill this out down below, and this looks kind of a lot like the previous outline, the grid for objectives. And so certainly this should look pretty familiar. What the content is, the time, who's the presenter, and then what kind of teaching strategies are you going to use, return demonstration, lecture, that kind of thing, simulation. So anything like that, and that's what that looks like. So then, here we go again, gotta get back.
Heather?
Yes, go ahead.
This is Jackie. On those boxes on the planning table, they don't grow as they fill them in?
We added a bunch. So okay. This will look brand new to you when you open it. We've added several more lines. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it should, and you'll notice on this sheet that the front page right now, it says revised to address that because it was too small and there wasn't enough room for the information. Okay. So we did add that. And again, I want to point out, this is if these are additional forms, they're not required. But this one should look familiar, and this is the educational activity form, right? And this is the one that we fill out with the activity, the nurse planners, the needs assessment, the current state, all that should look pretty familiar. And so this should look pretty good at this point, okay? Any questions about this form? This form should look familiar. Okay.
Hi Heather, this is Carolyn, and we're still having on that form, if you want to bring it up again.
Oh,
sorry.
Sure. That's okay.
There's still you know, some fields in that form, you know, they don't expand. There's just a little scroll bar on the right, like for your references and stuff. Is that going to change, or you're just going to keep it like that?
We're working with Adobe on that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're talking down in here.
Yes, I think H, yeah, it's in there.
H and
H-I, and then the
H-I, yeah.
And then the where your references are.
Yeah.
I
So
forget
here,
it.
this is, there was some
Yes.
problems with the overlap here in H9. That's all been fixed. So that
Okay.
do download the new version if you haven't. That's all been fixed. So if you type in here, it should not repeat itself over here. That was a problem, and then it wouldn't expand. So if you
Okay, and
have
if
any, yeah, if you have problems, let me know.
okay, if you scroll down, I
Mm-hmm.
think it was like um, where you got your information from, like your
Oh,
bibliography, or
uh-huh, uh-huh.
those don't
Oh,
expand either.
these here, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll look
Like the
into
peer
that.
reviewed. Okay.
Go ahead and pop me an email to remind me. Just to let
Okay.
folks know, anytime you find a problem, do email me because I do address it as soon as I get that email. And we get working on it. But we are working with Adobe because it's not so much in this form, but people were struggling a little bit with the provider unit application. And so we're working with them because the one thing that we want it to do is also print. For some of you, you really do prefer a printable version. So I'll definitely follow up on that. So thank you for sharing. The other thing I was going to show you, sorry I went too far back, was that I did put this in a while back, and I'm not sure people actually ever looked at this. And this might clarify if you had a new nurse planner. So Stephanie, this one's probably helpful to you. It's going to take a minute to load. So as soon as it comes up, but basically it comes up eventually. Come on, you can. There's loading. Um, is basically it's instructions on how to actually fill this out. So the idea is you go from gap analysis to education planning table to education form. And it's actually in this document if it ever does load for me, which is still thinking about it. So if it comes up, I'll bring it back up. So does that make sense to folks? Because I think folks are getting a little anxious at the workshop about the gap analysis and the education planning form. Any comments about that? Okay. So in terms of other forms, now that I'm stuck, hold on. Let's see if I can get back up. She's still thinking.
Heather?
Yeah.
Heather, it's Carla.
Yeah.
I guess I'd make a comment.
Yeah, please do, Carla.
So we're a provider unit, and I put the gap analysis and the meeting planner form. I put both of those in a file labeled tools. And we're a hospital, so like Susan's organization is different. They're a standalone educational place, so they probably operate a little differently than the hospital setting. But I know that my nurse planners are constantly have people coming to them with their hair on fire, and they want to, do this educational offering. And so I tell my nurse planners, take these forms to the meeting with you and help figure out what it is that they want, what do they need, is there truly an educational need, and if so, what the gaps are, what content do they, what outcomes do they want, what kind of speaker objectives are they looking for. And so for us at Kootenai, we strictly use those as a tool when someone approaches us to put an offering on. Okay, that's helpful, Carla. I appreciate that. The other thing is this, a reminder, now that I've unfrozen my screen here, is attachment A. These are the people that are in control of content, and this is the one, if you recall, where we're going to ensure that our nurse planners are identified. If you have a content expert, a faculty, content reviewer, anybody that can control content would be here. If they're on the planning committee, if they have a commercial interest, and we'll talk about commercial interest in a few minutes, and then any nature of their relationship. And as you recall, I'm going to go back out of this, you have a separate conflict of interest for your nurse planners. Okay, so this is for your nurse planners, and you only need to have it as new folks come on or the annual. So this one you wouldn't
normally attached to your overall file. You would keep a file of all your nurse planners, and then on attachment A, you got to make sure you list them. So if Carla or Darcy was to audit your file, then you would go, oh yeah, I see that, you know, Heather's the nurse planner. I got to add that bio form to my folder and send it in. But you only have to do your nurse planners and your primary nurse planners annually. And then if you've got a new person coming on board. And so again, it looks kind of similar. And don't forget, and this was a simple one, but you do need someone to sign you off as the primary nurse planner, which would be another nurse planner, right, for conflict of interest. So you definitely want to have someone else sign for you because you can't sign for yourself. So, and then you've got your standard bioform here, right? And that would be on your presenters, your content expert, whoever. And then you've also got attachment B. And attachment B is just your checklist that all the things are done. And remember, you can, for your quality improvement, you can either use our form that's a sample, or you can have your own process that you use for quality improvement. And it's the same with the activity evaluation we were talking about a little bit earlier. So those are down here. So you've got a template for quality improvement here. Again, you don't have to use ours. You can certainly use something else. As long as you're monitoring and identifying what worked well in the activity, what didn't, and if you're going to continue the activity. Was there a question? Nope. Okay. And then you've also got the disclosure. Now, there is a question on the webinar about disclosure. So disclosure, you have to disclose prior to the event. Still, that hasn't changed. But you don't have to have a disclosure on your slides and a disclosure statement, and you got to say it. You just have to identify your disclosure. And so most of us use this kind of template. And this is a template, so you can put in your organization what will allow them to complete the activity. So what are the requirements? And then if there's conflict of interest, and then if there's any additional disclosure, so commercial support, if there's joint providership, anything like that. And again, this is just a template. But the key about disclosure now is you do not have to put it on the slides and have your speaker go, I have no conflict of interest. As long as they have something like this in their packet prior, or you've sent it out on an email prior, then disclosure has happened. Does that make sense? Any questions about disclosure? So you're disclosing two components: how they successfully get the CNE, and then if there is conflict of interest. All right. Doesn't sound like there's questions for disclosure. Oh, Diane says thank you. You're welcome, Diane. Oop, I went too far. I'm sorry. And then in terms of I'm sorry. Evaluation, again, evaluation. Oh, I see I have a boo-boo here. I need to fix this for you guys. Somebody emailed me and I didn't do it on Friday, so I'll fix this. But this is just a sample, you know, where their activities, personal outcomes met, what would you change, what would you recommend for changing, and what other kinds of CNE. You don't technically, in eval, have to ask about the actual speaker. So it used to be we used to ask about the speaker, like, you know, were they well prepared, were they organized? You can do that for your own internal use, that's fine, and I'm not stopping you from doing it, but it's not an ANCC requirement anymore. So it's your decision, and like I said, you can evaluate through Twitter, you can evaluate through people putting their hands up, and you record, you know, 15 out of 20 put their hands up, yes, they understood the content, or you could do like we did, where we did we took pictures of people doing stuff. We did a narrative. So you've got lots of options. One thing I would tell you about evaluation is that you do want to think about long-term evaluation. So, 30 to 90 days post-activity. Now, keep in mind it's not required that you do long-term eval on every single activity, because that will drive you over the edge. But you do want to think about doing some sort of eval post on, be methodical in your provider unit about when you're doing long-term eval, and it might match up to your activity and be appropriate. And in that long-term eval, it could be your manager on the unit that you did for reports back that she or he has seen an improvement in, say, transferring positioning to prevent falls. And it can be that we need to have them do a narrative on that. So, or you can do, a one question, what have you changed in your practice? And they can click and say, what they did, and you can give them options, or they can do a narrative and say what they changed in their practice. But one of the things ANCC is wanting to see is long-term evaluation. So keep that in mind. And I would be strategic, because all of you are different types of facilities, about where the return on investment is. And I'm going to do a little bit on that in the next newsletter. But for some of you who are used to identifying your work, how many CNEs you've given, how many participants, but one of the challenges is actually, are you saving the facility money? Are you actually worth your value as funding becomes tighter and tighter? So we're going to talk about return on investment in February, actually. But I do think it's important to think about that your long-term eval may very well play nicely into return on investment. And then you'll see here, any questions about that? Joint provider agreement, remember we're not co-providing, we're joint providing, and that can be two organizations working together as providers, but one of you has to be the main provider. And so, for example, St. Luke's and St. L's in Idaho, St. Luke's was the lead, did all the paperwork, and then St. L's filled out your portion here, so that it was jointly provided. But again, if you're going to jointly provide, make sure that the other party has someone on the planning committee. And remember, the planning committee can be diverse. It doesn't have to be just nurse planners. It can be managers. It can be other disciplines. And that would go on Section A of your attachment. Question? Okay, so that's joint providing, and then where did I go? Oh, here, commercial support. Okay, commercial support, remember, is any product or marketing or reselling or distributing of healthcare goods or services. Remember this part here, this is the part I think people forget. Used or consumed by patients, or an entity that owns or controls and markets, resells those goods, right, used on a patient. So again, if we're doing a class on defibrillators and the company that currently supplies your defibrillators wants to present, that would be a conflict of interest, right? However, they may say, we know you're doing a class on defibrillators, and we want to give you $100 towards lunch or towards whatever you want, then you guys can choose as the facility that you can use the $100 to buy lunch or whatever. But remember that your commercial support, they cannot be part of your planning committee. They cannot be part of the activity, but they can provide you with funds and that kind of thing. Does that make sense? And that could be in kind, right? So again, They may, and here's a good example. Restricted would be, you know, the honorarium, speaker's expenses, and meal. And so that would be a good one. Again, when you're doing any kind of commercial support, you want to monitor that and assess for conflict of interest on commercial support. And then the last document I'll go through and then open it up for more questions is the addendum. So this is the addendum for commercial support. So obviously your information's here and your organization, and then basically what are they doing with the funds. Okay, so that's the addendum, who's controlling content. When it comes to control of content, remember that's why you have that attachment A. So you're identifying up front, and then you're assessing for conflict of interest. And conflict of interest need to be assessed by the nurse planner and evaluated if there is a conflict of interest. I'm going to put this screen blank for a second and open it up for questions. Wow, you guys are lively.
This is Carolyn. Could I just ask, is everyone's mic muted except for Heather's? Because I'm hearing a lot of background noise. I don't know if everybody else is.
Oh, I think that might have worked. So if you're not talking, go ahead and mute yourself, just because there's been some banging. All right, any other comments, questions? So I just want to be really clear that, you know, our role as reviewers is to guide and mentor you through the process, and it is a process. And so if you don't get the form quite right, we're not going to rip your head off. We'll just, you know, work with you in the process of review. And then, you know, if you have questions about the forms, and like I said, I forgot that one with the little check mark there, send me an email and I'll fix them. But we are working with Adobe to see if we can expand the cells a little bit more and print and see how that goes. And I will also point out, some of you are starting to use different software products to manage your provider unit files, which is perfectly fine. But keep in mind, we need to be able to open those files when you send them to us. So I'll point out Sanford, who's done a really nice job with InfoPath, I think it is, with Microsoft, and have got a very comprehensive file setup for their activities. It's really quite impressive. However, you know, we, my reviewers, who are all volunteers, don't have InfoPath, and nor do I, and so I can only see when they send as attachments, and we can see as attachments, just to be clear to them, not to panic. But people are doing different things, and so, you know, one of the things that was suggested, and I think we'll look at for next year's workshop, in my opinion, would be best practices. You know, we'll put a section for best practices as part of our workshop next year, because I think there's some good stuff happening out there as people get familiar with the forms. Any other comments? So I wanted to just clarify a couple little things. This is actually out of my newsletter, so don't try to read it too hard. And I'll put it, the newsletter, out in December, but a couple little things. So just to be clear, and I think you guys are pretty clear, that as approved providers, you cannot approve somebody else's CNE activity. You can do joint activity development, but you can't approve it. And I guess there's been some problems nationally with this. And so I just want to make sure that people are aware that you cannot approve somebody else's CNE. You can only do your own. And then a little clarity on commercial interest that's come up, and that is related to if a commercial interest supports the mobile app, can there be a landing page when it first opens that contains the name of the commercial interest logo? and it can be a reference, but it should also be supported in your evidence-based resources. So in your education planning form, it should be listed there and supports how you know what you know. So again, if you're going to use an app, make sure it's listed in your materials, your resources, and how is it being used. So yes, you could technically have an app from, say, Pfizer to a certain page on their website that you're using, and that would be fine as long as you verify it. Another big thing that people aren't doing, and this is not reflected of you individually, is people aren't verifying licensure. As you know, nurse licensure is public, and you can look it up through NurseSys, and we should be verifying our provider unit members, our nurse planners, primary, and make sure our licenses are current in the state in which we're working in. So just a quick reminder. Another big thing, oh, I did it twice, okay, was around advertisement. Sorry, I skipped one. Advertisement, can you have advertisement? Yes, but remember the advertisement, you need to be careful that it's not on top of your educational activity by the commercial interest, so their logo. So how I do it as a provider unit is I just put it on a separate page. That's what I do, so I don't have to worry about, you know, that I'm using their logo. If they're going to do it as an exhibitor, remember, put it on a separate page, make sure it's clear they're exhibitors, make sure to thank them verbally. If they have gizmos and gadgets, you know, they're going to be at the back of the room or out in the exhibit hall. You're not going to stand there and hand out a commercial interest, you know, bling. Is there written guidance regarding mobile apps to assist providers with remaining compliant? So the new content integrity standards apply to this, and I'll put those out probably in the next few days. And those have just been updated by ANCC, although they don't look a ton different than a couple years ago, but I'll put those back out for you. What do you do if a presenter has a proprietary ownership of content and does not provide resources or evidence? They don't want to share their resources, it's fine, but we need to know what else is out there in the literature. So, you know, if they are doing something as a in the content that's theirs, make sure you have done a full literature search to back up what they're doing from their research. So I get it, sometimes they're not going to want to share all the details of their research. Is it okay to use old or seminal research? And yes, it is, but remember, you need to be current, and really it's the last 3 to 5 years you really want to kind of be current, but sometimes materials don't change a ton. Like change management, for example, hasn't changed a lot in the literature over the last decade, but make sure you kind of look to see, you know, has there been anything updated or recent? And I always, this is my own pattern in my own provider unit, is I actually make a note, you know, review the literature and verify there's nothing more current. And I actually put that in my application because I'll forget what I did. Questions? And then another one is, can you use firsthand experience? You can. And so you certainly can use firsthand experience as part of your reference. But again, do as I am suggesting, make sure that you support it and that you validate it with literature or best practice and back it up. And then finally, the last one I'm going to talk about, and again, don't worry about trying to memorize this page because it's going to go into a newsletter, is about learning management systems. And many of you are using like HealthStream, for example. So keep in mind that they do not represent accreditation accurately. So sometimes what they'll do is people won't put the correct verbiage down. for their offering. The LMS is your platform, the learning management system. You are the approved provider. You're the one providing the credits, not the learning management system. So one way to do this is I actually put it on my web page right up front, so everybody's really clear who is actually giving the credit, even though I have a learning platform for my provider unit here at WSNA. It clearly states who I'm approved by. And so just make sure that's clear, whether it's on your website or, you know, any contact us about us, so people don't think it's the learning management system providing the credits. And that's come up quite a bit, apparently, not so much here, but back east. So that's sort of what I have for today. I will point out that I've just turned off the screen for you, that I'm willing to do another new nurse planner webinar in the new year. So if you've got some new nurse planners joining you or have recently joined you, do pop me an email so I can reach out to you and your colleague, and I'll set something up in January for them. The guidelines for the provider unit application, we've got a work group going through those. So as you recall, I separated out the activity applicant guidelines from the provider unit application. Can someone turn off their mic, because I can hear you moving things in your office? Thank you. So the provider unit application information and guidelines were pulled out specifically because you found it too confusing, which is fair enough. So we're just revising those, and I hope to have those out by the end of the year. If you're up for renewal and you're working on it now, you know, pop me an email and I'll send you our draft version, because it's not going to be a whole lot different other than, you know, crossing some T's and dotting some I's. But do let me know if you feel like you want to look at it. That's perfectly fine. The activity application guidelines are already up on our website, but the provider unit isn't. So just letting you know that. Welcome, Brenda. And Brenda is from Cadillac, and the reason I'm pointing it out is Brenda's going to get a surprise that her provider unit has been renewed as of today. So we've got another successful provider unit applicant done. And as you know, Carla's former employer, Kootenai, also was successful, and also St. Luke's as well. So we have 3 new provider units who just recently received their, or are about to get their certificates in the mail. So that's really great news for those folks. And I commend you for your hard work. So exciting stuff. For those of you who are in the midst of renewal, it's going well. We've got some new reviewers in training. So I'm happy to announce that Darcy Coffer is going to the dark side of provider unit review, and Diana Graham as well. So both of them will be doing provider units now. And we also do have 2 new reviewers joining us, and I'm just training those folks right now. And so we've got Stella Lorenza, and she is from Hawaii. So we all want to go visit her in Hawaii. And she's joining us on the activity side. And then a name that might sound familiar, Marva Petty, and she's a retired nurse from Vancouver, Washington, and is the district president for the Clark district. Will be joining us also as a reviewer for applications. So we are starting to grow a little bit again. If you're interested in becoming a reviewer, don't hesitate to pop me an email. Any other questions for the good of the order? Any feedback you'd like to share regarding the workshop or anything that's not working so well for you? Okay, you're a brave bunch. All right, well with that then, again, this is being recorded and I will load this. Please don't hesitate to pop me an email if I did not answer any of your questions or I spoke too fast. I'll be happy to do so. This will be loaded in probably 24 hours. I want to wish all of you a very safe and happy Thanksgiving and a lovely Christmas holiday. And I will be chatting with all of you in the new year in February, as I shared, and then the newsletter will come out in December. And like I said, in February I'll be also addressing return on investment. If you do have any other ideas or things you'd like to see in the newsletter or communication tools, do let me know. With that, everybody, I'd like to thank you for your time during your lunch break, and I wish you a lovely afternoon. Have a good day.
Thanks, Heather.
Oh, you're welcome. Bye-bye.
I don't think I earned it. Thank you. You're so sweet. Just the voice kind of gets me now.